Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
You know, we're not so deluded to think that just because we talk a lot about hockey, we think we are anywhere close to being NHL players. Like, I know some people, they lose sight of just how good these athletes are. But I have to say, I see a lot of us in the Red Wings rookies, and more specifically, Evan, I see you and I in the Red Wings rookie. Well, a couple of the Red Wings rookies, I should say. Michael Brandzeg-Nygaard is a 17 handicap, and Nate Danielson is a 4 handicap. And that
my God.
That is almost us to a T.
Oh, my God.
So our match series against hockey players that we haven't even started yet, we have to go up against those two.
There would be no strokes given in that match.
No. And maybe we cross over, too.
Yeah. That would be really good.
I'm sure they will agree to this. Absolutely. No questions asked.
They will clear their calendar.
Brad, I don't even, you know what, actually, I don't want to know where you are because it's really annoying to me that you could pick up the clubs and play and still be good after not playing for that long. So we're not even going to get into that conversation. You know, the Red Wings season is almost back when we start an episode with Golf Talk, but it's still Red Wings related. Still, folks, welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and more. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we are going to take the fool's errand, if it can be called that, because maybe it's too predictable, of guessing the Red Wings roster and lineup to start the season, or around where the start of the season is after things settle. We're going to do this now before the preseason starts. We are recording this 2 hours before puck drop against Chicago in Chicago to kick off the Red Wings preseason. And that way we can see exactly how wrong or accidentally right we are once the season starts. We'll get into lines, rookies, goalies, and more. We'll talk about news about Michael Brandzeg-Nygaard and where he's going to end up, his choice of the SHL or North America in the AHL, what's better for him, as well as some other notes on the Red Wings, what's upcoming in preseason, and more. We're then going to start our division preview process. It feels early, but it's almost here. So we're going to start with the Pacific Division, transparently, because it feels like the furthest away from being relevant to the Red Wings, and it's a little bit more, actually it's a pretty fun one to start with because they're a little chaotic, but we're going to be talking about the Pacific Division, those teams, what to expect, what's changed, doing some early projections and things like that before jumping into NHL news and then overtime. Before all that, I want to let you know that the Winged Wheel Podcast is primarily supported by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. If you want to support the show, you get access to benefits like our bonus overtime episodes, our bonus content that we post all offseason and throughout the season. You get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord, which is a phenomenal community. And you're also automatically entered into all of our giveaways. We give away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game, the vast majority going directly to our Patreon supporters. That form, if you are a patron, to enter is live on Patreon. So again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast if you want to support the show. The Red Wings roster is something that we've been talking about pretty much since free agency settled, or the lack of moves around free agency settled. And that's not a slight, just to call back. That is a complimentary thing because Steve Yzerman stayed out of the fray for the most part. But something we've been talking about is that the Detroit Red Wings have not a lot of movement to kind of work around some key issues that they have already. And that's not even counting the rookies who could potentially make noise over the course of the preseason. So that's why I called it almost a fool's errand, because things seem locked in, but let's do it anyways. And let's talk about what those issues are. So why don't we start with the forwards? And this is, I don't want to say the most locked in. This is where things live the most in terms of what the questions are, but let's start with what your predicted forwards are for the Red Wings for the 2024-2025 season. And for all of this, I want you to think the roster and lineup to start the season, unless you think there's going to be some moves right after puck drop on the season, in which case, say like 10 games in or whatever. And there's an obvious reason I'm stating it like that, which is the goalies.
Yeah, what I'm going to say is going to be opening night lineup. And as we talked about last episode, I do expect things to look differently by like Halloween, we'll call it, as an arbitrary benchmark. I think your first line, you're looking at Larkin, Raymond, DeBrincat. It worked so well last season, especially they heated up towards the end. No reason to change it. Then, since they have such a clear-cut top 6, that leaves you Tarasenko, Compher, Kane for the second line, which with Tarasenko there, hopefully adds a bit more of a scoring threat opposite Kane. We know he's going to be able to distribute the puck. He is a downgrade from Perron in some ways, but one way where he is a significant upgrade is a shot threat. So playing with Patrick Kane, that could be ideal. I think the third line is going to be the same as last year. Rasmussen, Kopp, Fischer, and they're going to get the shutdown role. Obviously, that line is pretty devoid of offense. Not that they're never going to score, but they are not going to be a scoring threat most of the time they're on the ice. But they did have success shutting down other teams' first or second line. And if they can do that to free up, Larkin's line to get maybe a second line. And if you get Patrick Kane out there against a third or fourth line, all of a sudden, maybe the Red Wings can exploit some matchups, which has been a huge problem for them for the last few years, which means you have the leftovers after that. Mott, Veleno, Berggren. Those are the 12 NHL players they have under NHL contracts. You hope one of Danielson or Kasper or Mazur forces their way into the lineup, but as of now, that's going to be your top 12, barring injuries, barring exceptionally poor performance in preseason. We do have the Austin Watson factor. He is on a PTO. He is well liked around the league. I foresee him as a possible 13th forward, depending what happens down the lineup. But I think those 12 you can almost write in pen right now, barring an injury.
Yeah, it kind of takes away from the suspense of it all to just have you listed, but you can't say anything other than what you listed. I also want to call out the incredibly convenient timing. Max Bultman also put out an article talking about the Red Wings roster projections. Max being a contributor to the Winged Wheel podcast and obviously on the Athletic Detroit putting that out. So we'll link that article as well in case you want to read more. But let's start with DeBrincat, Larkin, Raymond. Some folks will be thinking, Patrick Kane, is best unlocked when he's playing with talent who really is high-end talent. Because as you get later in your career, you can only move so well, and he's not really going to be doing a lot by way of board battles or winning pucks or back-checking and things like that. And he's had success with Dylan Larkin. But I agree with you, Brad. With Raymond excelling how he did at the end of the last season and throughout all the entire year, you want DeBrincat to have a strong season and take that next step and kind of come out of a little bit of a funk because he had cold spells last year. I think DeBrincat, Larkin, Raymond makes the most sense for the Red Wings first line, and that's like the most sure thing you can say about this roster. Maybe compared to Cam Talbot being 1A, but I don't even think that's as certain of a thing.
And it's not like Patrick Kane won't play with those guys. There will be power plays where he'll be inserted in with them, and they'll be able to flex their creative muscles. So just because Patrick Kane may or may not start on the second line doesn't mean he's not going to get exposure to playing with those three.
And if you want to galaxy brain this a little bit, Patrick Kane, of all the players in the top six, is the only one on a 1-year contract. You want to establish chemistry, especially between Larkin, 7 years left, Raymond, 8 years left, DeBrincat, 3 years left. There's a long-term vision that could be executed there. And then as the Danielsons, MBNs, Mazurs, Kaspers of the world graduate, now you're just looking to solve a second line problem, which is a lot easier. Now, mind you, if it's going to have to be a plus second line if you want to be a contender, but you have one problem solved if it works, and then you're just solving problem 2.
I'm glad you raised the second line. It's not just because it's next in the order, but I think that's where you're going to start to see just how well the Red Wings are going to be able to fit things in like a nice little puzzle, or how early they're going to have to start shuffling things around. And the reason I say that is because JT Compher has, again, he's really done well in terms of what the Red Wings needed him to be, which is a at least competent center behind Dylan Larkin. JT Compher is an excellent 200-foot player. He is not devoid of offense, so I don't mean to imply that. He contributes. I really like him, and I think he's worth his contract. It's not at all about that. Will he fit with Patrick Kane and Vlad Tarasenko? Patrick Kane is remarkably good for his age. Vlad Tarasenko's not the Vlad Tarasenko of old. Regardless, it's not a guarantee that there's going to be a mesh between those three. That chemistry is still to be determined. And, I know Kane's been skating with Compher in the offseason, and they know that that's the expected setup that they're going to have. How well will that work? Are they going to have to split it up and have Raymond drop down to the second line to try to drive some play? You don't know how it's going to shake out. I don't want to say it's going to make or break the Red Wings offense. I don't mean to say that at all, but it would go a long way if between, the version of Tarasenko that the Red Wings are going to get, Patrick Kane, hopefully upgraded even from last year, can combine. And then between that, JT Compher just has to be sufficient. If that's a serviceable second line and you're never going to maximize Kane and Tarasenko with Compher, but just kind of get a lot out of them, that will answer a lot of Detroit's offensive questions.
I think if you're going to juggle the lines, left wing's more likely because, again, Raymond and Larkin are the two that you have to focus on above all else. We've spent the last 3 months talking about cornerstones of this franchise. There's two of them. Build the chemistry. If you want to get DeBrincat down on the second line with Kane to get each other going in a scenario where the Red Wings aren't running hot, yeah, go for it. Tarasenko could probably pop up to that top line. And is he as good as DeBrincat at this point? No, obviously not, but he could hang. And he'd serve the same role DeBrincat does. Mind you, left shot versus right shot, but DeBrincat loves playing his off wing, so that doesn't make too much of a difference there. You got the shooters on the left wing. They're interchangeable if you want to tinker. I wouldn't, but it's an option if you need to shake something up just to get something going.
My only concern is we saw DeBrincat have cold streaks last year, and Kane, when things went south, Kane wasn't the person to drag Detroit out of it. It was Raymond. And so if DeBrincat's cold and whoever's playing center isn't really meshing the best with him at the moment, and that comes and goes. I don't mean to say if Compher doesn't work out right away, it's not going to work out at all. I think they can figure it out as the season goes, but moving DeBrincat down doesn't really feel like an automatic answer. I think it could be, but then I also have questions about, Tarasenko on the first line. Tarasenko's a big unknown, and we haven't talked about him because that signing came and it was exciting, and it was kind of, we have to wait and see. I've heard a lot of mixed opinions on what Tarasenko will be able to do. I've heard no way that guy's going to score 20 goals. I've heard he was one of the most underrated players on Florida at any given moment for his line or whatever. It's been all over the map. You wish it was Tarasenko from his prime in St. Louis, but he's kind of a question mark for me.
Yeah, I can't believe they couldn't secure him when he was in his prime.
Man, that was the dream. At one point, I thought he was the closest thing the NHL would have to Pavel Datsyuk. He was a really exciting player. Anyhow, that's the top two lines. If it doesn't work with JT Compher and you have to bump him down to the third line, and then, Nate Danielson has just become a shining star in a rookie season, he steps into the second line while we're doing pie in the sky scenarios. That's the answer right there.
Yep, let's toss a rookie in between the two most defensively deficient forwards on the team.
Welcome to the show, kid. He'll have a lot of fun in the offensive zone, though.
Yeah. Wow, Nate Danielson played the last 50 games of the season. He had 60 points. How did he end up at -45?
And the Red Wings are in the playoffs? Rasmussen, Kopp, Fischer, third line. That was made the most of two guys who kind of need to be in ideal positions in Rasmussen and Kopp. And then with Fischer, just exactly what the Red Wings need from him. I love that clip of him at the Tigers game. He's he has the kind of aura of a lifer Red Wing, even though he's not. I hope he is from here on out.
He's just having a good time.
It's just all-time dude. First team, all-time dude. So that line, you don't split it up.
No. And, Matt, you got three versions of the same player there. They're we love all of them individually, Andrew Kopp's contract aside. Still a valuable defensive player. Rasmussen is a plus defensive player. Fischer is a plus defensive player. They're all absolute pains in the ass in the forecheck. The formula is there for an elite shutdown line. We saw it in stretches last year. We know they're going to have their struggles offensively. Yeah, they could each probably chip in 30-something points as the season goes on, which is great for a shutdown line. I just love what they are able to provide the rest of the lineup. If they each only end the season with 20 points, but they're around an even rating, that's a huge win because you're taking the load off the Compher line. You're taking the load off the Larkin line. They can then really spread their wings offensively even at home because they're not getting the toughest matchups. They are going to be able to exploit favorable matchups. You're not going to get that on the road a lot just because of the way this team's constructed. But that's all that third line, if that is how it's constructed. Tyler Mott could probably plug in on that line real easily too, and they wouldn't lose a step. That's the that's the dream. They are the matchup line in every sense of the word, and they just take the burden off the rest of the roster.
Berggren, Veleno, Mott is what, you said for the fourth line. And that to me is like, you don't want to say that's the leftovers. To a degree, though, it kind of feels like it, because if you start to tinker with the lineup, that's where it feels like it will be. Unless, a Kasper, Mazur, Danielson makes the team and breaks into the top 9, then that'll move someone down to that fourth line. But you're not going to lose Berggren to waivers, so worst case, you're going to leave him in the press box. Veleno is on this team. They need him to be that depth center, and Tyler Mott, they signed him for a reason. It's to be that fourth line, that, potentially elite penalty kill in some people's eyes. That's that. And those guys are all you can pull them out of the lineup and you can feel some kind of way about it, and you should not lose an ounce of sleep over it. They're just not at that level yet. If Berggren starts to excel, on the power play and move up the lineup, then that may be a different story. But for now, that they're it's not a bad fourth line. You can't be mad at it at all. There's two-way players, there's defensive players, there's potential offense, but I think you're going to see that tinkered with.
They're going to be the insulators, Mott and Veleno specifically. We know Mott's proficiency on defense. Veleno's is coming along. He's a plus skater, great transition player. That right wing spot with them is going to probably be the entry point for a Danielson or a Mazur at some point this season. Right? I don't know if Mott can play as off wing if Kasper comes up, because I can't foresee any of those three coming up and immediately jumping in at center. I can't see any of those guys coming up and immediately jumping into the top 6. But you put them on that line, you give them the Daniel Sprong, Thomas Vanek treatment. They're not getting tough matchups. They're not playing 18 minutes a night, but they're also not, deficient offensively. Veleno can transport the puck. Mott can be the safety net. And then, maybe it's a nice entry point for a rookie to get in there. Because, hell, let's be honest, that's how the Red Wings view Berggren right now.
Yeah.
I know he's played a lot of NHL games, but reading between the lines, the concerns they have about him. So him slotting in on a hypothetical line that looks like that is probably what they want from him. And if he does not have a great start to the season, I don't think they would hesitate to put in an Austin Watson or a Carter Mazur in his place on that wing.
Fully agree. On the note of Austin Watson, it is a PTO, and if this was a season where Detroit had a lot of space, I think based on what I've heard, how the players feel about him and how players around the league feel about him, I think, this guy's probably likely to come in and provide that toughness. It might still be a contract that's then, sent down to Grand Rapids, would probably clear waivers, all that. But I just don't see the space right now unless they're comfortable and the conversation is, hey, you're not necessarily going to be factoring in unless we feel like we need that. Or if, injury dictates that, or if, they really aren't happy with how Berggren plays during the preseason. That's how I see that maybe happening. It's not impossible. It's just kind of a tight lane for him.
Well, they have the easy workaround if they want to keep him around. Like, hey, man, we're going to release you from your PTO. We're going to start the season without you. And then second week of the season, oh, look, this contract just happens to be sitting there and he's not exposed to waivers. Or he could just sit there as a backup plan until they figure out the 8D3 goalie situation. Or maybe they just say, screw it, we're getting rid of a goalie or a defenseman before the season starts. We're going to carry 13-8-2 or 13-7-3, whatever scenario. Because I really don't like the idea of just carrying 12 forwards. I understand opening night, you got some time, but that is not one where I'm putting a Halloween deadline. That's one that would have to get resolved quickly.
Any objections to that forward lineup as it is? There's not really. Basically, I'm asking, do you think Watson is in there, or do you think Kasper, Mazur, Danielson are going to make that prediction?
No, that's my final prediction. I have objections, but that's what I think it's going to be.
I'm on the same wavelength. I have strong opinions on a rebuilding team lacking rookies, but we don't need to relitigate that conversation again.
I want to sit here and be bold and say one of Danielson, Kasper, Mazur will break through. And again, I'm not saying it's impossible, but they would really, really have to shine. And the thing that moves me towards play it safe, and this is just probably what it's going to be, is that the Red Wings really like the idea of those guys going to Grand Rapids and excelling there and making that program even better. It can't hurt, right? And so like Evan said, we've talked about it and we'll continue to talk about it as the preseason's going, because we'll see how, Danielson does or Kasper does. And if it's amazing, any three of those guys, then we're going to say, like, getting him in now is actually more beneficial to the Red Wings. But I think that's the Red Wings thinking. That's my prediction. And one more thing I also want to note, we mentioned this already, but we're talking about these lines as if they're concrete. They're not. Lines will change throughout the season. Lines might be different to start the season. They might settle on exactly this. The chemistry might just not work. Don't get married to lines in the NHL, no matter how much it might make sense on paper. We're talking about this for the sake of discussion. And also for to state the obvious, preseason lines are sometimes they're to find chemistry. Sometimes it's just because you want to give some guys some ice. Sometimes it's to give the young guys on that line a test. It's all fake and made up. Don't get married to those either. They don't mean anything.
Sometimes it's, hey, these are the 12 guys we're playing tonight. Let's just figure out where they're slotting.
Yeah, and they're going to change throughout the game. Preseason is where you go to do weird stuff and try things out and give guys every look possible, which means you're going to do stuff you would never see in the season.
Which, getting back to the point you were making about the rookies, the one thing I am interested in watching, because I think where the organization's mindset is going to be in regards to the rookies is, do any of them obviously outperform Berggren in the preseason?
Yeah.
I think you can write the other 11 guys in pen into the opening night lineup. I think the role they have for Berggren this year, they would be just as comfortable throwing any of the other 4 guys in.
Not the same players, but you would get largely the same effect.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
And if we're sitting here in the preseason and Berggren is got 1 secondary assist, is a -4, and Danielson sitting here with 6-7 points again, I think they would think real long and hard about that's his spot then. Because again, not the same player, but they would fill the same role in the lineup.
You know what else? I would agree with it. I'm not saying Tyler Mott is better for this team long-term than Berggren, but based on, how this team operates, I wouldn't necessarily disagree unless Berggren was, playing really well by his own standards and then he's still lost out. Then I'd say, yeah, that's kind of a tough ride. I might have some objection to that, but by and large, if that's what it costs, then I'm kind of all for it. If it means giving one of those rookies who deserves their spot. So that's the forward group. Again, unremarkable. That's why we said it's not going to be sexy, but I think all 3 of us agree. We would love if we're wrong and one of those 3 break in. The defense. I'm going to start with
Speaking of unsexy.
Yeah. Well, hold on. I'm going to start with a second pair that's projected. And Derek Lalonde said Simon Edvinsson is going to play in the top 4. Everything kind of spreads out from the second pair. Simon Edvinsson on the left side, Jeff PEtry on the right side. Why? They worked well together last year. That's it. It stands to reason that it's because Simon Edvinsson's a good defenseman, but Jeff PEtry on the second pair or anywhere in the lineup kind of worked the best when he was with Simon Edvinsson. And so that's why I'm not completely cringing, even though I said keep Jeff PEtry off the second pair, right D slot all off season. That makes sense. I understand it. And then you go up, obviously Mo Seider on the right side on the first pair. You really can't put anyone else there other than Ben Chiarot. So the Red Wings are hoping that chemistry is there and Chiarot can hang in and be as good as he was last season.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a pretty obvious construction of the top 4 to start.
I think the only other guy who you can say is mostly solid is Erik Gustafsson on the right side. And he's probably, I imagine, unless something he really shows himself well in the preseason, going to be on the third pair. He might be on the second. Who knows if that changes? And then everyone has Olli Maatta on the left next to him. I tend to agree that could be Albert Johansson. They could cycle through. I don't think Justin Holl is going to factor into this lineup much unless injury dictates as such or unless someone's completely terrible. They start flipping sides, things like that. But I think you're looking at Chiarot, Seider, Edvinsson, PEtry, Maatta, Gustafsson with Johansson rotating in.
So I've got a theory, and I want to hear if I'm crazy on it, because this is my Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia on the board. Yeah. The Red Wings don't have a lot of cap space right now, so every dollar that they can save is going to be valuable. Patrick Kane, they probably is going to hit a lot of his bonuses, and they'd rather they not carry over. Do they just waive Justin Holl, send him to the AHL this year?
Max cap relief is $1.15 million. No one's going to claim him. If they do, God bless. Thank you for your service. No one's going to. Why not?
he's the guy who's going to factor in to this D group the least. You can always recall him if something goes sideways. Johansson is waiver eligible, so if he goes on, he's gone. Mata's just plainly better than Holl, so there's your 13th forward if you wanted to keep a Watson or a Danielson or a Mazur or a Kasper around. I don't know. I have a real tough time making an argument for keeping 8 defensemen as this team's constructed right now. Mata has a tough start. Someone gets hurt. Holl's right there. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say Holl is a terrible below replacement level AHL player. No, he can fill in as your number 6 defenseman adequately. He's not good. Don't mistake what I'm saying. But he's also not a dumpster fire 75% of the time he's on the ice. He can give you 12 to 15 adequate minutes a night. If they want a right shot option there, if the Gustafsson experiment is going horribly on the right side and they need to shift him back to the left, that could be a solution. But yeah, max cap savings because he makes more than the max. So you would get the max cap relief for every day he's down there. I don't know. To me, I think they're going to keep 8 to start, but that is the least justifiable of the position groups in terms of how it's stacking up right now.
I understand why the Red Wings are in the position that they're in and they're not moving yet. I said this, I think, last episode or the one before. It's a tight spot and they're going to have to make some decisions. And the only thing that makes sense to do right now, barring someone coming in and saving your butt and just taking Holl off your hands, is you wait. You wait to see what happens in preseason. You wait to see if someone shines through or falls apart. You wait to see if there's injuries. You wait to see if Husso is healthy, all that. Yet you just kind of have to wait and see. You don't have to be cap compliant until right before the season starts. You wait. That's the point of it. And I agree. I think the big thing with Holl is that the contract is terrible. If he's adequate 70% of the time as your number 6 guy, then that means he could be adequate as your number 6 guy, but you just don't pay someone who is at best your number 6 guy that much money. But that's not what we're doing right now. So yeah, I would like to see it as, the 3 pairs that we mentioned and then Johansson factoring in. I'm in favor of waiving Holl, barring something else changing. Maybe if they move a goalie, then that opens up space. But again, the forwards have questions as well. So to me, again, unsexy for defense, unless Evan has any kind of, out of left field projections here. And that one is going to have to be solved at least a little bit by Yzerman.
I don't think I have anything crazier than what we've theorized or hypothesized over the summer. My opinion on Albert Johansson is he should be in the lineup more than he's not. Because if you don't think he's better than Olli Mata, then why are we wasting our time?
The right side really is the linchpin to all this. They need Erik Gustafsson to be at least really good as a third pair right D. Like they can't afford for him to be anything less than a good option as their third pair right D. Ideally, they have him be able to play third or second pair right D because PEtry, again, PEtry took too much heat, but at the same time, a lot of the heat was deserved because they played him out of his position. You can't rely on PEtry all season at second pair right D. I could be wrong, but I just would be surprised.
So here's the Albert Johansson conundrum, and I have a hard time arguing that he's not on talent one of the 6 best D in this organization right now. Chiarot, Johansson's not taking his spot with Seider. I think that's much as obvious. Edvinsson and PEtry, probably not a spot for Johansson there, so we're talking the bottom pair, which as a second-round defenseman, rookie, that's where you're going to start almost every time anyway. Okay, well, how good defensively can Gustafsson be? Because if he's...
It's a big question.
If he's an absolute defensive liability, let's say to the level of a Shane Gostisbehere last year, you can't put Johansson with him. You're sewering the kid, right?
So what's the point in having Erik Gustafsson on the team?
Power play. He's to replace the points.
Power play quarterback number 1.
It's Gostisbehere version 2.
Like he's there to run their first power play. That is the whole point of bringing him in. And
I will say also, because I still think there is a little bit of an unknown on defense, and there is the opinion from some who have watched him and have worked with him who think he can do more with more opportunity. I don't know how much you can bank on that, but something that he's not a black hole defensively.
Yeah, the whole theory with him all offseason and signing him for cheaper and less years than Gustafsson to play essentially the Gustafsson role was, yeah, he's cheaper and he's better defensively. And it is worth noting, if you haven't looked up Erik Gustafsson's stats the year he was in Chicago with Kane and DeBrincat on that power play, he put up 60 points. Like, there is a reality where this guy is really damn good. But in relation to the Johansson conundrum is he good enough defensively that he can play with a rookie? Right? That's going to be the question, because they're not pulling him out of the lineup. If Johansson goes in, it's probably Mata. So I'm with Evan.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah, I'm with Evan. I want Johansson playing more than he's not. Mata's probably the undeserving victim of that. But as this D is constructed, there is not a lot of wiggle room in how this group is constructed. The best case scenario in my mind is by American Thanksgiving, Christmas time, Edvinsson is such a rock defensively, you can get PEtry the hell away from him. You can put Gustafsson up with him. And then now you have a lot more flexibility on that bottom pairing.
What we're going to see is Edvinsson, Seider, Chiarot, Gustafsson, Johansson, PEtry.
You know what? I'm here for it.
Why not? Let's get weird.
Sure.
The goalies. Cam Talbot, Alex Lyon, Ville Husso. What's going to happen?
Husso's the wild card to this entire lineup. You have a nearly $5 million goalie who can't stay healthy. And if he gets hurt in preseason or early in the season, that changes just about everything we've talked about. Really, right? Then there's your 13th forward, there's your 8th defenseman, there's whatever hypothetical you want to run through. But if he's healthy, he's your most expensive goalie. So is he the number one, or does he not play at all?
It'll be really interesting to see how many preseason games he gets and how soon he gets them, because that will indicate to me how closely the Red Wings are watching his performances and where his durability is at.
He's playing game number 1.
Yeah.
And for example, tonight he's playing 2 of the 3 periods, and I think Kosa is playing to play third. He's going to get a lot of time. He's going to get a lot of looks. They need to know what they have. And that's not even the only question. Really, the most certain goalie to have is Alex Lyon. They know how good he is, and they know how durable he is, more or less. Unfortunately, if Husso or Talbot make things difficult, then he might be the odd man out because he has the most value in a trade. And with Cam Talbot, I don't think that they're going to use a preseason to determine how good he's going to be. But I think a bigger question for him over the course of the season is, the LA Kings had a really good defensive system last season, which allowed him to thrive. But I also do think he's a very good goalie. But he's not a sure thing. Very few goalies in the NHL can be a sure thing on a bad defense. And right now, until we're proven otherwise, the Red Wings are a bad defense. Simon Edvinsson can change that. Erik Gustafsson can change that. Albert Johansson maybe could change that. But last season, they were bad. And it's hard to be a good goalie behind a bad defense. So what are you going to get out of Cam Talbot? I don't know, man. This is the biggest question mark for me. And the thing that people think is certain, which is Talbot being the 1A, which I even said at the top of the show, that's not even guaranteed. I don't know.
He could be the 1B.
He could be the 1A.
Could be the 1B.
Hey, the way this is constructed, he could literally be the 1C.
Carrying 3 goalies, again, seems insane on paper. But carrying 3 goalies when you don't have a solid solution at goalie and your probably most talented goalie that's already played for you has proven that he needs someone to take a lot of games, then carrying 3 goalies makes sense in this situation. So I'm, if I don't think about it too hard, I'm pro Steve Yzerman finding a solution here where they don't give up any assets and they don't, unless someone takes Husso's contract for free, they just offload a goalie in a way that's productive to the team. But then that's still a risk because you just don't know what the other 2 are going to do for you quite yet.
You know what I want step 1 to be in this process? I want them to play Husso a lot in the preseason.
That's what they'll do.
See if he can hold up. Put him through the grinder. Again, sucks for him, but if you have an injury history, you got to get answers. So put him through the grinder, have him play a bunch of games, and if we're sitting here after 4 or 5 preseason games, he looks decent, he's staying healthy. Okay, then you have I'm not going to call it clear, but a clearer picture going into the season of what you're working with, and you can plan around that.
And you might be thinking, well, you said with Justin Holl, you can waive him and just send him down to Grand Rapids, and then you get, $1.15 million in cap relief or whatever, and that works. Great. Why don't you say the same about Husso, for example, if he doesn't work out? Well, Brad mentioned last episode, you have Campbell down there. You have Jack Campbell down there, who, again, we haven't even mentioned yet. He is there for veteran presence. He's there for stability. We talked about how he can offer support to Costa, teaching him how to be a pro. You can still learn something from guys who aren't at their peak. And with the AHL schedule, just having him take some of the grind away. And then you have Sebastian Costa. That's ostensibly your goalie of the future, you hope. You throw Ville Husso into that mix, then Brad's concern from last episode becomes very real. You don't necessarily have to take away Costa's minutes, but then you're like, what, are you just going to send Husso down there to rot? Is it to push Campbell away from the net? Maybe I guess that's fine. I don't know. There's not really a clean solution unless something comes to light during preseason. So not fun, but it's still a big wait and see. But for the 23-man roster, those DeBrincat, Larkin, Raymond, Tarasenko, Compher, Kane, Rasmussen, Kopp, Fischer, Mott, Veleno, Berggren, Chiarot, Seider, Edvinsson, PEtry, Mata, Gustafsson, Albert Johansson, Justin Holl, Talbot, Lyon, Husso. Unless you waive Holl, unless there's an injury, unless a goalie is traded or something like that, then there isn't really room for Danielson, Mazur, Kasper, or another surprise, an Austin Watson or whatever.
It's probably worth noting, too, it wasn't and isn't normal how healthy the Red Wings were last year.
It was weird, right?
Outside of Husso and that 1 month of Larkin, they did not suffer much at all in the injury department. Like, they were one of the healthier teams in the league. And even at that, yeah, it sucks Husso hurts, but you're carrying 3 goalies. It didn't, they weren't up the creek because of it. It was just that 1 month of Larkin where we're like, that's an injury problem. The rest of it was, they were...
Wallman obviously being the
towards the end of the year, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, that's not going to affect this year. It kind of gave us a preview.
Okay, that's the Red Wings' too early roster projection. Neither of myself or Evan are brave enough to put anything out of left field in there like we usually like to do to you, Brad. This is, unless something changes, this is just what it's very, very likely to be. Okay, very quickly here, Michael Brandzeg-Nygaard is going through this training camp, and it's pretty unique that he's even in training camp and is a good opportunity. Nobody was expecting him to make the Red Wings roster. You still see how preseason goes, but we all know that he's either destined for the SHL with Skellefteå or in the AHL with Grand Rapids. And he kind of mentioned that the team has almost left it up to him because a big part of it is what he's comfortable with. This is his first time coming over to potentially play full-time in North America, and you got to be ready for that both on and off the ice. So what's best for MBN right now?
Whatever makes him happy is the first answer. If he's more comfortable in Skellefteå, send him to Skellefteå. If he's more comfortable in Grand Rapids, send him to Grand Rapids. Taking that out of it, my preference would be Grand Rapids. You drafted this big physical winger, ultra high compete, wicked release, can get it off quick. It seems like a guy tailored to smaller North American ice. Might as well get him used to it, right? The talent level between the SHL and the AHL is similar enough. I'm not super concerned on that front. He plays a North American style of hockey. Cool. Have him playing North American style of hockey. And if it goes well, if it goes poorly, he's right there. Very easy to help. Hell, if it's going well, call the kid up by Christmas. He's right there, right? Like, keep the options open for him. I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world either way. Like I said, it's just a preference, but I know he played small ice in some international tournaments and he played small ice in Norway, but the competition in Norway is so far from the AHL that it's not even worth talking about because the time and space is completely different, even though the rink dimensions might be the same size. So I would like him acclimating to the North American style, but if he thinks he'll be happier and develop better in the SHL, sure.
There's certainly pros and cons to both options, right? If he stays in Grand Rapids, he's close to the nucleus of the organization. If he goes back to Skellefteå, he's got Axel Sandin Pellikka there. There's still lots of resources available to him from the Red Wings. But I'm with Brad on this one. He is one of your top picks, one of the keys to your future. I think the sooner you absorb him close to the organization, the better. You can have your fingerprints all over him. And he's going to have Dan Watson as a coach, and it's no shock that all three of us think very highly of Dan Watson. I think it's a no-brainer for him to go to Grand Rapids.
And to really galaxy brain this, him and Sandin Pellikka should be playing the same spot on the power play. Which one of them gets PP1 in Skellefteå?
That's funny because you think he would get...
Sandin Pellikka is an absolute weapon from the left flank. He's already got a goal from that spot in his first 2 games with Skellefteå this year.
And that's where MBN fires it from.
And that's where I would ideally like MBN to play on the power play as well, because he's a right shot with an absolute weapon. Like, he could be power play 1 in that slot in Grand Rapids, because that's not where Danielson's going to play. That's not where Kasper's going to play. That's not where Mazur's going to play. That's MBN's spot. That's Sandin Pellikka's spot. If you put them on the same team, they might,
compete for looks.
Exactly. So that's one small factor. MBN's got a wicked enough release that he could play bumper. He could play strong side on the power play. So it's not the end of the world, but if I'm developing MBN, I want him on that left flank.
Just very quickly, I love watching Evan really focus on the word nuclear. Any nuclear...
It's pronounced nuclear.
Yeah, it's very Homer Simpson. It's very funny. Werenski, will you give it to us?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I have to agree. The only thing, the deciding factor really is, are you comfortable? Because if he is truly, you've seen time and time again with NHL prospects coming from overseas, it's hard. These are kids, right? And even if you're not a kid, even if you're the most mature kid in the world and you're an adult, it's hard to move across continents. It's not your first language. You've never been there before. You never lived there. You don't have your social circle around you. You probably don't have any family around you. It's very hard to do. Grand Rapids is a phenomenal place to be, and what a great community and what a great organization, and they would only surround him with a ton of support. But still, if it's to the point where you still just need some time to kind of get warmed up to that idea, that to me is, you don't want to tank a prospect too early. So that would be the only thing that would be like the red flag to me. Otherwise, yeah, I'm very pro Grand Rapids, with the caveat that Skellefteå is it's a pretty good second option. It's not like you're sending him back to play in like the Norwegian 4th League or anything like that. And then final note here, just on the preseason. Again, we mentioned, you're going to get a lot of looks at Husso. It starts in an hour or so. So next episode, we'll be starting to cover all of that. We are going to come back to you with our Pacific Division preview, but first we're going to hear from the sponsors of this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. We love a great deal as much as the next podcast, but we're not going to take a bunch of slap shots to the shins just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile told us it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, we called them on it. We gave a longtime Winged Wheel podcast listener a chance to try Mint Mobile, and the first things they told us were that activation and setup were super easy, and how simple, effective, and user-friendly the Mint Mobile site is. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/wingedwheel. There, you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number, along with all your existing contacts. Find out just how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/wingedwheel. That's mintmobile.com/wingedwheel. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/wingedwheel. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Summer is over and the puck has dropped to kick off the new hockey season. Now's the perfect time to save time and money when it comes to your dinner routine. Skip the meal planning and grocery store lines and cut down on food waste with HelloFresh's convenient doorstep delivery and pre-measured ingredients. No more endless searching for recipes that are actually worth cooking or spending a ton of money on bulk ingredients when you only need a small amount. With HelloFresh, everything you need to make delicious meals comes right to your door, pre-portioned and fresh. Plus, the included step-by-step recipe cards make cooking simple. My wife and I actually used HelloFresh even before they partnered with the Winged Wheel podcast. For us, we obviously loved how everything was perfectly prepared and ready to cook with the instructions, but more than that, we had a blast trying new dishes we would have never cooked otherwise. It's helped us explore new foods and cuisines without having to spend a fortune at a restaurant or worry about not knowing where to start. For free breakfast for life, go to hellofresh.com/free-winged-wheel. One free breakfast item per box while subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life just by going to hellofresh.com/free-winged-wheel. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. The Pacific Division. The chaos, the Wild West. When you look at the Western Conference, it almost annoys you. Not to say that the Western Conference is easy or that Detroit would do any better out there, but oftentimes you see teams excel in the Western Conference out of nowhere, and it's like, would you do that in the Atlantic? Tell me honestly that they would, but
the answer is no, 100% of the time.
I got to tell you, it makes for really fun outcomes in the NHL. Like when you have that kind of chaos, that kind of disparity in teams like randomly really good and randomly really bad, it allows for crazy like playoff pushes. It's really fun, and that's the division we're going to start with by predicting and projecting this season. We're going to go in reverse order of standings last season. The San Jose Sharks, they finished with 47 points. They tanked once, and it worked. Those bastards. Macklin, Celebrini, Will Smith, Askarov, and we'll see who else. They're not going to be a top team, but they're going to be an interesting team. Thoughts on the Sharks?
They are going to be fun to watch. That's the most polite way I can put it. There are going to be a lot of goals in San Jose Shark games this year.
For me, they've basically gone from an empty cupboard of prospect talent to potentially the best in the NHL. And as a Red Wings fan, it is very much okay to have hatred burning in your hearts, thinking of what could have been for the Red Wings. But this team's going to be very bad again. They'll be a little bit better than they were last year, but it's going to be another year of pain as you wait for the dangling carrot to finally approach. This team is going to be exceptionally good in the very close future. You just have to get through a few more years of pain.
I like what they did by adding Toffoli and probably going to play with Celebrini at some point, if not for the entire time. Obviously, everyone's going to want to see from the Red Wings perspective what Jake Wallman does there, and that conversation is going to be ignited until there's a consensus on what Wallman is for the Sharks. And then Askarov, to me, like that's fascinating. You talk about Celebrini, yeah. You talk about Will Smith, yeah. But Askarov is going to be fascinating. Is he going to shine right away? That's really tough to do for goalies.
Well, considering their best defenseman is Jake Wallman, yeah, he might have a tough go of it this year.
I will not listen to the Cody Ceci slander in this podcast.
Hey, I didn't say he wasn't the second best defenseman on the team.
I was saying he's the best.
I will not take the Jake Wallman slander.
So for the San Jose Sharks, I think I agree. They're going to be fun, but you're not going to anticipate too much from them. Another tank year, you kind of shudder to think that they're going to win the lottery again and then make out like bandits again. That will annoy the hell out of me. But for now, and we haven't even talked about Eklund either. I think, how is he going to excel? I know, Brad, you were personally a really big fan of him. You're going to see a look to the future, and you're going to see how good Celebrini is to start, how good Smith is to start. Probably bottom of the division in my mind, but still good fun. And I love the jersey changes they made.
Oh, the team's leaning into the color, and the Pacific Division is on the forefront of that. I love it. I want more of it.
The Anaheim Ducks, moving up in reverse order, they were also a terrible team, 59 points last season. And they're another interesting case to me because this is another connection to Detroit, but Pat Verbeek going to be GM of the Anaheim Ducks and making some interesting moves over there. They have Leo Carlsson. They have Trevor Zegras. They have McTavish. They have...
They added Cutter Gauthier last year.
Yeah, like they have enough talent where you're like, even if they're not good now, you can see how just their core is going to make them a strong team to contend with in the future. They had so many high-end prospects at key positions that they had the luxury of moving them. Like they're really well positioned, and they still have Gibson. What's going to happen there? Is he going to suffer another season of sucking? I'm surprised he's still there after this entire offseason. They added Robbie Fabry, talk about a Red Wings connection, but also, again, like what they did with their uniforms. Anaheim Ducks.
Bright orange.
Yeah.
Right down to the pant. Love it. Now, you kind of glossed past what I think is going to be the most interesting position in Anaheim, because we know about their young forwards. We know about, Minchikov and a couple of the D they're hoping to graduate and grow this year. I think the key to their season is in goalie, and it's not John Gibson. Lucas Dostal was electric last year.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's fair.
I understand the stature Gibson has. I understand the money he makes, and I understand that he's not some schlub. He's still a capable NHL goalie. He ain't their future. Dostal should get exactly as much run as they need him to get. Gibson be damned. If that's 40 games, great. If that's 50 games, great. If that's 30 games, great. Whatever they think he can handle, he should be playing because he was a real standout on a bad team last year.
Whenever a team says they want to rebuild on the fly, I kind of laugh. But then over the years, it's been proven that sometimes teams are pretty uniquely positioned to do it. I think the Calgarys of the NHL who have been saying it are harder pressed. I think the Anaheim could potentially, with a few key moves, move up the order fast in my mind. I don't know that it's going to be this year, but they're not going to be worse with those young players only getting better and being added to the lineup.
This is the team in the division where I say, when are they going to take the next step? They've got Mason McTavish with another year under his belt, another year of Trevor Zegras. What more is he going to add? Like Leo Carlsson looked excellent last year. Is he going to take another step as well? This is the one team in the division that could massively jump up in points. I'm just wondering if this is the year.
Seattle Kraken. They went out, they made moves, they brought in Montour, they brought in Stevenson. They are not interested in sucking again. The obvious thing is the NBA is going to expand. The Supersonics are probably going to come back, and the Kraken know that their run as the main characters in town, they're probably going to have to compete. Not that teams don't support each other, but you want to make sure that you're not sucking and then you lose all these sports fans to another new team. And that makes sense. Are they going to be able to move up the order? Did these moves, long term, we have questions about how much Stevenson's contract is going to be worth it, how much, Montour's contract is going to be worth it. What's it going to do for them next season, though, is my question.
They spent a lot of money this offseason, and they still suck. Their goaltending is an issue. They're paying Philip Grubauer $1 billion to be terrible. They hope Shane Wright comes in and can be a solution to some of their problems. They hope Matty Beniers can shake off his sophomore slump and become a player right now. But for a team that's a recent expansion team, they are shockingly old. Like, this team is not well positioned at all. They are, what Seattle is right now? They are absolutely primed to be the new Minnesota Wild, where they are just stuck in purgatory forever.
Well, if you're going to be the Minnesota Wild, you're in the right division to do it, because at least, some years that might mean you move up the order.
Yeah, but look at how many teams in that division are on the come up right now. Like, San Jose is not going to take long to catch up to the low bar Seattle has set. Anaheim might do it this year.
Yeah.
Like, you have your powerhouses at the top. Like, right now, the team that's saving them is Calgary.
Yeah.
I mean, Seattle made probably the two worst free agent signings, at least, in dollar value and probably length as well, in bringing in Chandler Stevens and Brandon Montour, who I, obviously coveted and was proven correct that he is actually good at hockey.
Evan only remembers what's beneficial to him, and that's what I love about him.
Absolutely.
He's going to look at his stats.
As long as you guys don't keep receipts, I'm good.
The amount of times Evan will ask a question in the group chat where the answer was visible to him as he typed, even with the keyboard up, is hysterical.
I wasn't reading.
Well, you can't, but,
So, anyway, I have a lot of questions because Chandler Stevenson has not been good since he was the number 1 C in Vegas.
Well, okay. I think that's actually a little diminishing on Chandler Stevenson. I agree the contract is rich.
I'm welcoming him to prove me wrong.
Okay, Chandler Stevenson, hear me out. JT Compher.
Great.
For 7 years.
Yeah.
At $1 billion.
Yeah, not great. I would have done it for $500 million. I'm just saying. And you could have put me on LTIR right away. But no, I do agree. I don't know. I'm not ready to completely be out on Seattle, but I think a lot's going to have to go right for them. Brad, what you mentioned about goaltending, like if Grubauer comes back and has a renaissance, then that's going to go a long way for them.
You can say that about any team. Hey, if their goalie's elite, they're going to be great.
That's the secret. Goalies will make or break you.
Here's the thing, though. When was Philip Grubauer good? Like, we're going back a half a decade to the last time he even resembled anything as a passable.
You are Erik Karlsson's biggest fan. You should be the biggest proponent that this can happen to NHL players.
He ain't a goalie.
He may as well have been sometimes because he was hardly a defenseman.
Fair enough.
Moving up the order, the Calgary Flames, 81 points, 4th last in the division last year. The only remaining Pacific team we haven't talked about that wasn't in the playoffs. talk about a team who has question marks and wants maybe more than they can do for themselves. No Markstrom, no Mangiapane, Shellington obviously gone, but did they do enough in bringing in, Mantha, Jake Bean, who else? Ryan Lomberg. Oh, Kevin Ball in the New Jersey deal. What are they going to do?
Free fall. That's the answer. The best way I can phrase this is they are going to have a real tight battle this year with San Jose.
You think they're going to be that?
This is a terrible hockey team. Read the list of players they added again and tell me you have any confidence in a single one of them.
This one just says Evan Lobsinger.
That might actually improve their outlook.
I better start my offseason training.
Are you going to be able to move out to Calgary for the winter?
If they accommodate my pickleball schedule, yes, we can make that work.
We got Draper on the pod here. Yeah, I agree. I think this is the team that has... It's almost... Does it feel reminiscent of the Red Wings when they were refusing to accept what they were and moving firmly in the direction of rebuilding? Like, they didn't do that for years and it burned them.
No, Calgary's very clearly rebuilding. They sold off everything that they could.
They did, but did they hang on too long? The Kadri and Uyghur, and I know at times I was like in favor of that deal, and they made the most because the Kachuk situation was raw. And I mean, I say this with a heavy heart, but if you go back to when Johnny Gaudreau left Calgary, they weren't expecting that either, and that burned them. They've lost a lot unexpectedly, but they tried to hang on almost for 2 or 3 years too long.
So there's two paths for Calgary this year. Huberdeau bounces back. Kadri hangs on to being really good for another year. Uyghur hangs on another year for being really good. And they float this team to 11th place in the Western Conference. Or age catches up with any of them because they're not young. And we're talking about whether or not James Higgins would sign long-term in Alberta.
Yeah.
They are in a real bad spot, and they are almost better off. Their aging core fall off a cliff now because it gets
lottery.
Yeah. Otherwise, if Kadri, and again, Kadri is one of the most underrated players in the league for the last few years. But if Kadri's still really good this year, you get out from under that contract ASAP. Trade him while he has value. If Huberdeau has a renaissance, you pray somebody's dumb enough to take that contract. Uyghur probably still has some value.
Why are you laughing at me?
Watch it happen to Detroit. Detroit takes Huberdeau's contract.
Yeah, just clip it now, I guess.
Not funny. So Calgary is in a real bad spot. Them in Seattle are going to probably have the bottom half of this division locked down for a long time.
I think for me, the biggest loss is obviously Jacob Markstrom. He was an elite goalie. You're now making room for Dustin Wolf, who has been, by all rights, excellent in the AHL, but that's a lot of burden to put on his shoulders for what this team is. If they can move Nazem Kadri at the deadline, they signed Anthony Mantha to a 1-year deal, and he had 23 goals last year. He could be a sneaky trade-off at the deadline.
That's a trick with Mantha. Always keep him in a contract year.
Exactly. So there's ways for them to quote-unquote retool on the fly, because I still do like some of the pieces they have there if they can return to form.
All right, moving up the order, the Vegas Golden Knights, 98 points, snuck in last year after it was looking dicey at times. I say snuck in, but still cool. Yeah, actually, snuck in. They were right at the end. What are they going to do this year? Because did they have big ads? Not necessarily. They lost Marchessault. Mantha was only there for so long. Stevenson, Logan Thompson, Carrier, Alec Martinez, and then the ads weren't big. Victor Olofsson, Samsonov. Oh, Zach Aston-Reese, I should say. So you almost want to look at that and think, oh, God, that team's not going to be good. They're not going to compete. And then you realize, what their D-core is. Pietrangelo, Theodore, Haig, Hannafin, McNabb, Whitecloud. That's unreal, right? That's filthy. And then you still have Jack Eichel as your number 1C. You still have William Karlsson. You still have Tomas Hertl. I forgot they got him as well. So, you have those guys. You have your Mark Stone. You're kind of moving around them, and I have a hard time betting against them being competitive for the division still.
It's just health with them.
Yeah.
Their bottom 6 forwards are sneaky bad. They do not have great depth up front, but their top 2 lines will still be good. Like you said, their defense is unreal. The 3 questions that they have. Health, because it's always health with them. Can their depth at forward hold up, and are their goalies legit?
Oh, they brought in Ilya Samsonov, who was questionable at best in Toronto.
Every goalie gets better when they leave Toronto, though.
That is true. We just bear witness to that last season.
So I think they're going to be good. I don't think they're a cup contender as currently constructed, but I think they're good.
They brought in, I don't know if you mentioned this, but they brought in Alex Holtz, right, as
That's
well.
right,
So
yeah.
they'll be looking to see if he can really start to come to form and fill in some of the goal scoring they lost in the offseason. So they're still on paper a really good team, but like you guys highlighted, it all comes down to durability with this team.
The LA Kings are an interesting one as well, because a lot of people would have thought they overachieved last year. They lost Edvinsson. They got rid of Pierre-Luc Dubois. They lost Cam Talbot, who's great for them. Matt Roy is a big loss. Warren Fogel's a decent ad. Joel Edmondson's not nothing. Darcy Kemper and the Dubois deal is weird, but I don't know. I guess Dubois wasn't really adding anything, and maybe Kemper comes back for you, and Tanner Jeannot didn't really pan out in Tampa Bay, but still could be something. LA has enough in the system and players who are still only getting better where I believe that they're still a good team. I just can't peg whether they're going to be competitive for the division or just be like one of those bottom of the divisional seeds competing for a wild spot teams.
I think they're a very real risk to fall out of the playoffs.
You think so?
They didn't get better, like not by a long shot. And don't get me wrong, I still think Kopitar and Doughty are great players, but they're so old, they're not getting better.
And they play a lot of minutes. Like, they do a lot of the heavy lifting for that team.
Yeah, Kempe is still great, but like when you start to go down this lineup, there's a lot of holes, a lot of question marks.
Defense is, you'll see.
Bad. Goaltending, bad. Byfield should hopefully take another step for them this year, which should help mitigate the loss of Dubois, because as bad as Dubois is, they didn't pick up anybody to fill that hole, and he was supposed to play a prominent spot on this team. So I think LA is a candidate to be sneaky bad. Again, if Kopitar and Doughty keep escaping Father Time and Kemper reverts back to the
decent.
Yeah, the slightly above average goalie that he was in Arizona and Colorado, then yeah, there's absolutely still a path to a playoff spot for them, especially with how weak their division is. That's the biggest thing they got going for them, is the teams below them suck. So they don't have to beat out too many teams to get into the playoffs, but looking at the wild card spots coming out of the Central, that's where some teams could sneak up on them.
Quentin Byfield, Brant Clark having big seasons would go a long way for them. All right, moving up the order here, the Edmonton Oilers, who are going to be a lot of people's cup favorites. What the story is out. Everyone knows what the story is on this team. You still have Connor McDavid. You still have Leon Draisaitl. They're in their primes. You lost Broberg and Holloway to those offer sheets. Fogel's not there. You offloaded CC. You brought in Jeff Skinner, who I thought was a great ad for that team. You brought in Edvinsson, who's, if he's healthy, is I think could be a sneaky good ad. Podkolzin. Like I if you've given up on Podkolzin, maybe you know something I don't. I'm not saying he's guaranteed to still be who we thought he was at draft time, but that's not a nothing ad. You don't have Kane for the first at least half of the season, it looks like. They have, I think, every chance that they had last season and some more experience. Goaltending during the season, maybe not as big of a question as playoffs, but all that's going to probably be more of a question come postseason. For now, they're going to be contending for the division.
This is the best team in the league, and they get to spend a good chunk of the season beating up on Seattle, San Jose, Calgary, and Anaheim.
You think best team in the league?
I think best team in the league. On paper, you've got McDavid, you got Draisaitl, you got Bouchard. Skinner looks like he's an adequate number one goalie. Like you mentioned, the depth they added at forward is phenomenal, and that's always been a huge problem for them. Darnell Nurse is overpaid, but he's still a good top four defenseman. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins isn't too far removed from 100-point season.
Zach Hyman, 50
Zach
goals.
Hyman, like, this team is about as stacked as you can get in a salary cap world, and they have two of the 5 best players in the world, and then a bunch more guys you could probably comfortably slot in the top 30. So it's theirs to lose this year. And in the regular season, I mean, look how good they were last year, and remember how laughably bad they were for the first 6 months of the season.
I'm just looking at their defense, though, and I'm like, an Ekholm Bouchard injury, either one of them derails a lot. I think they can outscore a lot of their problems during the season, but if that persists, then that could be a problem.
An injury to one of those two is only a real problem for them if it's in the playoffs.
Well, right now has to be the time for the Edmonton Oilers because they're about to be paying $30+ million for 2 players. Mind you, they're 2 of the best players in the world, so that's not a bad problem to have. But the thing I'm going to need to see this year is Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl play less. We saw in the finals how they were gassed. They were done.
Yeah.
They just ran out of steam. You cannot be playing them 20+ minutes every single night. If they're running away with the division, you got to limit some of that time. You got to let some of your depth play, power play minutes. You got to try and save some energy in the tank for the playoffs.
Yeah, it's a good case study in superstars can win you games in the NHL, but not to the tune of the NBA.
And if it's 5-1 going into the third, you tell them to take their clear tape off and untie their skates.
You see football players do it a lot. The Bills, when they were up 30 on Jacksonville, Josh Allen and all their starters didn't play in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I was watching with friends who had players in their fantasy teams, which my mental health has never been better since I stopped playing fantasy football, by the way. Are you you say clear tape and not sock tape? What are you on that?
It's clear.
Wow. Is that like a Windsor thing?
Are we having a shower versus not shower argument again? Because I can't do this.
Apparently out west, it's Socko.
I've heard people call it Socko, but just usually like the biggest.
It's like a West Coast thing.
Yeah, not that we never call it clear tape, but more people call it sock tape.
I've never heard anyone say that.
It's really?
I'm
90% clear on the teams
I cannot have this conversation.
Have you ever seen a sicko who puts stick tape on his over the socks on the shoe?
Yeah, his name's Justin Applicator.
Oh yeah, he did, didn't he?
Sorry, puts what over his
stick
sock?
Tape, like white.
Oh, that's not all that uncommon. I think Bedard does it.
NHL players who are made of money. But if you're that is insane use of stick tape.
Yeah,
anyway,
you're not wrong.
Moving on, the Edmonton Oilers, as I was saying, I agree with you, Evan. Those guys can win you games, and that's why Brad's probably right that if you add everything up, they're the best team in the league. But at the same time, if all of your weight is in those few guys, not that they're not deep on forward, but then you need them at the end, and that's where a team who's more fine-tuned, better productive up and down the lineup at all positions is going to prevail. I'm not now going to jump to one of those teams because I don't know what it is, because that was Florida in this case, but the last team who won the Pacific last season, the Vancouver Canucks, are they going to repeat the unexpected glory run from last season, or is the show over? They lost Elias Lindholm, Zadorov's gone. They added Jake DeBrusk, Denton Heinen. They are Daniel Sprong's landing spot. What is this? Is this going to be another successful season, or is the PDO bender coming to an end?
Oh, the PDO bender's coming to an end. They'll probably still get in the playoffs just because, again, this division sucks horribly. But the Demko thing is going to be the big sticking point for them. He was a damn near Vezina candidate last year before he got hurt, and a huge reason for them being as good as they were. And they don't know when he's coming back right now. They just went out and signed Kevin Lankinen as insurance to play with Shilov. So, hey, you still got Pettersson, you still got Hughes. You still got JT Miller. You still got Brock Besser. They're going to be good. They're going to be all right, especially in this division. But what happens in net is going to go a very long way to determine, are they challenging for the division, or are they just trying to hold on to a playoff spot?
How many of these teams have we mentioned? If their goaltending is good, they will be good.
Well, I'm going to say with Demko, he has to play. Forget if he's good. He's got to play.
Yeah. It's so funny. I think about Sarah Sivian reporting that he was out for the playoffs. And understandably, Vancouver fans were passionate and it was a playoff run. And who's to say any fan base wouldn't be the same? But everyone got really mad at her. And they're talking about he needs to really take his time to come back, because if he doesn't, this could be like career-altering permanent injury. And it's him rushing back was a problem in the past. So I agree. It's almost better for them, in my mind, if they have a little bit of pressure off and they come in as a middling playoff team. And I agree, they still have enough talent there to do so.
They do, but they are also a team that could be a sneaky candidate to just miss the playoffs. Oh, right.
I would be surprised. I don't know. I think it's hard to make that drop. If Brock Besser isn't healthy again for some reason, I know the blood clot was a weird thing, but I don't know. Or if he doesn't have as strong of a scoring year, then...
Yeah, there's a lot that has to go right for them still if Demko isn't playing for a sustained amount of time.
Okay. Predictions on final standings. You can go reverse order. You can go top to bottom, Pacific Division, and then stipulate which teams you think will make the playoffs.
All right. I'll go top. down just because it's easier for me to keep track of my thoughts that way. Edmonton's winning this division. There's no doubt in my mind. Despite the depth issues, I still think Vegas is going to be a really good team. Obviously, health, always a wild card with them. But assuming health, they're the second best team in this division. I'm going to go with the Vancouver Canucks at 3 still. Again, a lot of question marks around them, but I just really don't like any of the teams below them in this division. Man, I probably still have to go LA here, and I don't like it because I don't like them. I don't think they're any better this year, and the formula for a team to maybe take an unexpected fall is there. And now we're just at the point in the division where everybody's probably fighting for James Haggins at this point. I don't like any of these teams. So for the hell of it, I'm going to go Anaheim 5, Seattle 6, San Jose 7, Calgary 8.
Top down, I'm going to agree. I'm going to say it's Edmonton, but I'll say it's really close to Vegas. I think it'll be closer than people think. Vegas has a winning system, and I understand you lose key pieces. It's hard to recover, but they still have a lot of the things that made them great there. So that's why I think Vegas will hang on. I'm going to believe in Vancouver third. I think they have enough momentum, and if they do the right things with Demko, then that's going to do a lot for them. After that's where it gets tough. I agree with you, Brad.
Oh, I should mention Vancouver is my playoff cutoff. I think both wild cards are coming from the Central.
Okay. I think I agree with you because I think LA, Seattle are interchangeable. I'll go Seattle, then LA, because I think that is very counter to what Brad thinks about Seattle, and I will probably, get bit for that. But those two in my mind are interchangeable, and then I'll go Anaheim, San Jose, Calgary. I think Calgary is going to fall. I think Anaheim's going to surprise with, how not terrible they are at points, but I agree. I think it's just going to be the top 3 here. I think both are going to come from the Central.
I've got Edmonton, like you guys. No surprises there. I think Vancouver is still an excellent team, so I have them at number 2. Vegas at number 3. And then after that, this is a very top-heavy division for me. I've got LA because I still really do like their center depth. They're going to try Quentin Byfield in the middle this year, and if you've got Philip Deneau, Anze Kopitar, and Quentin Byfield as their 3 centermen, sign me up. After that, it's a bit of a glue-eating contest, but just for the sake of posterity.
It always catches me off guard.
I'm only laughing because you're laughing. Stop being unprofessional.
Sorry.
After that, I have Seattle because I still think they're wild card competitive, but I don't really see the elite upside on them. After that, I've got Calgary because I still think, just like Seattle, but a worse version. They've got some pieces there, and if the wheels fall off, then that's really going to change things. But I think they could still maybe hang around, but I think they're likely a bottom 10 team in the league. After that, Anaheim, as much as I was complimentary of their young players, saying, is this the year they start to really push? They're still a young team. There's going to be a lot of mistakes out of them. I'm just not sure getting beat up by Vancouver, Edmonton, and Vegas every night is going to be conducive to a better season. And then after that, San Jose. I'm very excited for them, very jealous of them, but this year is not the year for that.
All right, that is our Pacific Division preview. I know we had NHL notes as well, but for the sake of this episode, we'll jump into overtime. In future episodes, we'll talk more about the upcoming Amazon series. We'll talk about the Swayman-Shesterkin goalie market thing, and there's lots to talk about as the season ramps up. God, I love having this problem again. It feels good to have to push things to the next show. But for now, we're going to jump into overtime. Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Again, patreon.com/Winged Podcast. The bonus overtime episodes, the bonus content, something we're actually recording some fun, way off the board bonus content right after this, which is going to be very relevant to at least one of our interests. You also get access to the Discord and the giveaways. Remember, 2 tickets to every Red Wings home game, the vast majority going directly to Patreon supporters. You allow us to do things like host Winged Wheel podcast nights in partnership with the Detroit Red Wings and the Grand Rapids Griffins. You allow us to support the Jamie Daniels Foundation. You allow us to bring in Max Bultman from the Athletic Detroit as a contributor to the show. produced, expected by whom, hosted by Prashant Iyer and Sean Shapiro, all that and lots more. So again, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. Questions from our patrons. Give Wallman the Heart says, let's say a rookie forward makes a team. How would you organize the bottom six, assuming this means you're breaking up the Rask, Kopp, Fischer line? I guess it depends on which rookie forward makes it, but lay out some scenarios.
Well, I wouldn't break up that line to start, but if I am, that would have to, I feel like that would have to be Kasper. He would be the one that would play the best on that style of line. So maybe you bump Rask down and you give Kasper the left wing spot on there, and then, you know, you put Rask, Berggren, Veleno, whatever that might be. It would probably be Rask, Veleno, Mott, if we're being honest. That would be my guess.
If Danielson made it, would you try him as the center on that line? Just to start, just to give him a little bit of a feeler?
Probably not. Just because of what that line's going to have to do
that's
for
fair.
the team this year.
That's very fair. I like what you said at the show, like the roster projection with Berggren probably being the odd man out. It could also be Mott coming in and out of the lineup, or, you know, Veleno, even if he's cold. But that fourth line feels like the access point if someone's going to come in. Josh Stella says, thinking about future lineups in the Cup contention window, I thought of a question for all of you. If you were told that one of these pairs of prospects would reach their ceilings, but the other would flame out, which would you choose and why? Pair 1 is Kosa and Kasper, and pair 2 is Danielson and Sandin Pellikka. So one reaches their ceilings, but one flames out. So Kosa and Kasper together, or Danielson and Sandin Pellikka together?
Am I crazy? This feels easy.
It's easy. It's Danielson, Sandin Pellikka to reach their ceilings.
1,000%.
Because that's a near on, if not guaranteed, number one center.
There's a top six center and a number one power play quarterback. And with how goalies are
on the right side,
Colorado won a cup with Darcy Kemper. Like,
yeah, we have Trey Augustine waiting in the
exactly.
wings.
Like, that is a no-brainer for me.
Winging It from Boston says, which goaltender between Husso, Talbot, and Lyon gets the most starts this season, and what would it mean for the team in the case of each one?
Talbot's the most likely. He's the only one that's got a contract beyond this year. He was the only one who was regularly good last year, albeit on a different team. If that is the scenario, it means everything's going according to plan. If Lyon is getting the most starts, it means Husso's hurt and Talbot flamed out. And if Husso's getting the most starts, it probably means Talbot flamed and Husso has found his St. Louis form, which would also be a very good scenario.
If Lyon gets the most starts, but it's marginal, then I still think that's good. Because if he gets like 40, Talbot 35, and 7 for Husso, then that's still probably a good outcome.
I could see that. Like, Husso has the highest ceiling of them all. So if he's getting the most starts, that's probably the best case scenario. But the contract status of Talbot's what throws in the wrench, because you're keeping him around no matter what.
This next question from Frank the Tank, I'm going to raise because I think it brings us to a really important point about the lines in the lineup and calling things first, second, third line. Frank says, hey guys, looking at the projected roster, if all things go the way we think, am I crazy to think that Rasmussen, Kopp, Fischer is an NHL fourth line and not third line? The typical hard to play against guys who chip in offense. Not a fan of having them out there for 15 to 17 minutes a night masquerading as a third. What are your thoughts? And to me, this is where I think two things. One, I think the NHL has changed. You very rarely have the luxury of, stepwise order of these guys get the most minutes. And two, the Red Wings aren't talented enough to have anything beyond a bona fide first and probably a bona fide second line. They still have to work their depth in a mix and match kind of way. And for a team that's not going to outskill the other team a lot of nights, you're going to need your shutdown line to play more minutes because that's going to be your bread and butter to try to win games.
I have them labeled as the third line because they are likely going to play the third most minutes. And I think people aren't going to want to hear this. There's going to be nice they play the second most minutes.
Yeah. That's the Red Wings formula.
They're not meat and potatoes, like just driving guys through the boards, taking bad penalties, contributing 10 points a year type line. Like, they're water bugs. They're hard to play against. They play great down low. They're not the goons of yesteryear. They can chip in enough production offensively to warrant playing third line minutes.
At least on this version of the Red Wings. It's not horrendous for them to play more than, a Veleno, Mott, Berggren night, one night.
They'd be on a good team, they'd be a pretty solid fourth line.
with how they played last year, you would grab a lot of playoff teams who would say, yes, I would like to guarantee that as my fourth line. We would love to have those guys and what they're able to do.
Yeah.
Okay, for the sake of time and the thing that we're recording after this, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. We're going to be back with you on Sunday. That's right, we're back to 2 a weeks. Thank you all so very much for tuning in, and thank you to the sponsors of the Winged Wheel Podcast for this episode. To all of our Patreon supporters, we could not do this show without you. We have a lot of fun stuff coming your way, and it's thanks to our patrons. Again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast if you want to support the show and to enter your name into the 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game draw. If you want to support the show, but Patreon's not for you, leave us a rating wherever you're listening to this podcast or watching. So on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, leave the thumbs up on YouTube and subscribe wherever you get your show. It does make a difference for us. Tell a friend. To our name level supporters on Patreon, we love you. We thank you. You're cooler, smarter, better than everyone else around. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Alexander Hansen, Victor Zetterberg, Ghost of OSBP, Glenn Brabham, Cronner's Left Knee, Ashley Whitehead, Sea-Line, Matthew M. Rice, Admiral Matt S. at the Cheesebag Navy, Carl Brutana Nanaluski, Carl Provy, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gimmergirl, Derek Enstam, Seider, Dickens, DJ Denton, L, Eric Hill, God Creatives, Give Blood Fight Probert, Goose Looney's Drinking Club, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Jeff Pridemore, Jonathan Miller, Kalen Wood, Marcus, Marty, Matt Keeler, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, R.A., Rawl Pud, Riley Enright, Ryan Britt, Scott Martin, Skeletor, That's What I Appreciate About You, the new Jackson 5 Holes. This Patreon member list is brought to you by Head On, apply directly to the forehead. Arjun, no free ads, man. Wallman's Elite Dancing D, Winged Boogie, Iserplan Stan, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, A.A. Ron, A.B., Adam Rose, All Motor No Hands, Ann Stanislavski, Axel, Sandy Pellica, Bellingham Acid Balls, Chimkim Nuggets, Chuck Buff Chest, the Tarpless Goon, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Leighton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Datsukes Dangleberries, Eric Nance, Frank Stanley, Gene Sullivan, Goon in the Room, Grepsky, Griffey Boy, Ian, James Pridemore, Jeremiah Dobo, JM Rhapsody, Joey Jojo Shabadoo, John Evans, Derogatory, John Engels, Josh Yelton, Keenan O'Donohue, Brad is Wrong, Plays Like Sprong, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Les Grossman's Ungodly Firestorm, Linda Hull, Ophelia, Steven, The Hodag, The Hat 123, Trent Thorough, Wings fan in Chi-Town, Wings fan in St. Louis, Scott, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. We'll talk to you Sunday.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockeytown Evan.